Hello and welcome to Anemone TCG. Today we're going to be looking at a really interesting deck. This is going to be Justimon Control. It's going to be using the Justice Kick option to kind of cheat out these Justimon, get lots of Tamers on the board, using lots of strong option cards in our security to make sure our opponent doesn't get too far ahead while we're setting up, and then busting out a really strong Justimon who's going to do lots of cool form changes to get lots of damage in. It's very much worth mentioning I am not the mastermind behind this deck. I learnt of this from a YouTube channel called Avid Herpetologist, who has a great video on it. If you'd like to learn more about it or see it from a different perspective, I'd really recommend checking that out. I will put the link to their video and their channel in the description. So as a general kind of strategy overview here, our main goal is to be building up a strong backboard of Tamers that are going to give us access to our Justimon for a cheap cost. We're going to be using lots of security bombs to give us that little bit of extra control and safety whilst we're setting up. And then once we do manage to get one of our Justimons out, we're going to be using the form changes that Justimon has to be swapping into them to be doing big damage to our opponent, clearing their board, and generally making sure that we're having the fun and they aren't. So this deck really does break lots of the main conventions that you will come to understand when building Digimon decks, but because it's a control deck, it's got a very different style of play. So the main draw package that we have here is Digimon from EX2 and the promo Guilmon. These two in conjunction, when it's promoted up and swings, lets us draw 2 cards just to ensure that we can get the pieces we need to do our combos and the Tamers and things that we need nice and consistently. It also means we have a nice red egg that's going to give us access to some of our red options like our Gaia Force, Crimson Blaze, that we're going to be using to keep tabs on our opponent, making sure they're not getting too far ahead. It also means that we can be swinging nice and early with a rookie, so our opponent has to deal with something. They do have to set up some sort of defense, else these are going to keep swinging and make our job once our Justimon is set up a bit easier. So jumping straight up into our Justimons, this deck of course, because we're going to be playing this Justimon through the effect of the Justice Kick option we'll be looking at in a minute. We don't have any stack to build up here. The Justimon is exclusively the stack, and that's why we can play the Guilmon base as a draw package. So we are going to be playing this with Justice Kick, which is going to make the cost nice and cheap, and then we're going to be swapping into the Excel Arm and the Critical Arm form, the 2 cards in the back there. These both have strong digivolving effects that are going to help clear the board and give us some nice bonuses, and they have good removal with the Critical Arm, so we can keep tabs on our opponent, making sure we're taking out blockers and things that might be stopping us, and then we're going to be cycling back into the Blitz Arm to be unsuspending, and then back into a different form to keep the process going. So here we have Justice Kick, the option that kind of makes this whole strategy work. The way it does work is its play cost is reduced by 1 for every Tamer we have in play, so that's why the 12 cost is quite daunting initially, and is a play cost similar to how it would be if we just played a Justimon on its own. But if we have lots of Tamers set up, we can bring this cost right down, and we'll look at a Tamer we'll use later that helps reduce the cost even more. So once we play that Justimon, we can then delete a Digimon that has a play cost that's less than and equal to it. So if we have a 12 cost Justimon that we're dropping, we can then delete something on our opponent's side that's 12 cost as well, and it's not difficult to get this Justice Kick down to a 4 or 5 cost. So deleting a massive body on your opponent's side for a really cheap option is really good, and then say we're set up on our side of the board to start doing our combos because we've just been allowed to play our Justimon. It's also got a decent security effect because obviously they're going to be swinging into our security a lot because we're not going to have an initial defense set up too well. It lets you play a black Tamer from your hand, which we'll have plenty of, and then it gets added to the hand, so we have it for our combo later on. So going into some of the black options here that we're hopefully getting in our security stack to give us a little bit more safety whilst we're setting up our plays. These are easily going to be played from the hand as well, because obviously we're going to be getting quite a lot of memory from all the Tamers we're going to have. We play the purple Mimi, who helps reduce option costs as well. We're going to be able to play these frequently because we're always going to have a black Tamer set up in some capacity, whether it's Rio or Izzy, or we're going to have a Justimon on the field. And so they're all very potent security bombs, so if you're hitting one of these in the stack, your opponent is not going to be having a good time, which is always fun to flip over that card, see it's something powerful, and then get to a really strong effect. Moving on to our red options here, it's a similar case for our Gaia Force, but we do have some slightly cheaper options here as well if we do need to use these in a bit of a panic just to clear some bodies off the board. Crimson Blaze is a fantastically consistent card, especially good against things like Bloom Lordmon, some slightly more rush style decks that are playing quite a wide board, because obviously it's reduced for each Digimon on your opponent's side of the field, so we can completely clear those out. And then we've got Fireball as well, who can either be used to remove a floodgate that's stopping us from doing a potential play, or it can contribute to that draw package we looked at earlier on, giving us 2 cards. So it's not difficult at all to promote your Guilmon, play a Fireball, draw 2, swing with your Guilmon, draw another 2, then have all your pieces ready to go. You're going to be hitting things quite consistently with all the draw that we have in this deck. Moving on to our black Tamers here, who help make this all possible. We've got our 2 Izzies here, both mainly used for their memory benefits, but Izzy Azumi on his own is great because he can let us search the top 3 cards of our deck and put them in an order that benefits us. So if we're just missing one piece, we can move a card to the top, draw it next turn, and go from there with a nice memory benefit. We're not playing too many Izzy and Joes because we're clearing the board so frequently with all the security bombs we have and things like that, that we're kind of hoping our opponent doesn't have 2 bodies on the field. But if they are, because they're rushing things out, maybe they're playing things off the effect of other things very quickly, or just playing searches really fast because they're trying to hit something themselves, we will get an extra bonus of memory that's going to let us do some extended plays. We've also got Rio here, who not only provides a nice DP bonus to our Justimons whilst they're swinging on both turns, but also lets us search our deck for a Justimon, search the top 4 for a Justimon. So we're going to be hitting the pieces that we need. If we're missing our Excel arm for the combo or Blitz arm or something like that, we can try and search for the one we need. And then finally we've got Daigo, who gives us a nice defensive tool, because when we evolve into a level 6, we can get blocker on that Digimon, which is really good because we're going to be constantly evolving into a level 6. That's all this deck really does. So it means we get blocker on it as well, and with the ability to swing and then unsuspend with some of the cards, or with Blitz arm that we'll look at in a bit, we can then benefit from that blocker. It also means that when one of our opponent's Digimon unsuspends on the main phase, we can get 1 memory. So if our opponent's Digimon unsuspends during our main phase, we will get a memory. So if your opponent's playing Old Force or something that's constantly unsuspending, we're getting an extra benefit back, and it's just nice and controlly in that aspect. Moving on to some miscellaneous Tamers here that aren't black Tamers. The first one at the front here is Mimi, who is the one giving us 2 to our Justice kicks, 2 memory off the top, because we can suspend her whenever an option card is played, and this lets us get 1 memory back. So not only is she contributing 1 because she's a Tamer, but she's also contributing 1 because of her effect. But this also lets us control our opponent and things like that if they're playing a lot of option cards too. We've got Hero in the back, who gives us a nice bonus to DP, is a memory setter in case we're not hitting an Izzy, and gives us more frequent access to our red options. So maybe you've just promoted the Guilmon, it's swung into security and died, maybe we need to do a red option there, so having the Hero on the board would give us that access if we can't get the egg back out. And then we've got Hina, who has a very consistent effect where if your opponent has a Digimon in play at the start of your turn, which they're very likely to do, it's uncommon in Digimon for there to be no Digimon on the board, so we get a nice little bit of memory in that regard. So what I'd like to do now is look at one of the main kind of bread and butter combos and a little bit about how the playstyle of this deck works. Obviously it's not a conventional Digimon deck by any means, so it's quite important to have an understanding of what the loop is, what the playstyle is, to get the most out of it. So we're going to have a look at having a backboard like this, with all the draw power and things like that. It's not uncommon to have several Tamers set up. We may again have some in our security stack and things like that. So we're going to be starting our turn with at least 4 memory from our Izzy and our Hina, because it's very likely that your opponent's going to have a Digimon in play. We've also got 3 Mimis set up, and these are important to get down because they're so beneficial to our Justice Kick effect. At 2 play costs, they're not hard to get out by any means. We may even say again hit them in security and things like that. And with all the draw power, it is very likely that we're going to get what we need in our hand. So then we're going to play our Justice Kick It may look like it's for 12, but remember this is being reduced for each Tamer we have in play, so immediately 5 is coming off the top, bringing us down to 7. Then Mimi is refunding 1 for each Mimi in play, because she gives us 1 back when we use an option card. So this is bringing it down to 4, which is at minimum how much memory we'll have from our memory setup. This lets us play a Justimon, who is then going to delete our opponent's Digimon with a play cost less than or equal to. Most things at this point in the game are about a 12 cost, if not less, so you're going to be deleting something quite big here. We can then swing with this. The when attacking effect of Blitzarm says we can activate one of its when Digivolving effects for each Tamer we have in play. So naturally one of the effects we're going to want to use is to unsuspend this Digimon. We're then going to pump it up with a bunch of DP. We can give it maybe plus 6k here, and then maybe we'll use one of our Digimon, one of our when Digivolving effects to remove a play cost of 5 or less. So maybe this is a floodgate or something like that, maybe a small blocker. We can then say unsuspend using that when Digivolving. We can then for 1, and this may pass the turn here, go up into something like Justimon Critical Arm. This may, this will let us bounce the Blitzarm back to our hand when Digivolving to delete something with a play cost of 9 or less. So that comes out, we shoot something on the enemy side of the field that's got a play cost of 9 or less. So then we've choked our opponent out. They're going to do something, they might play some small Digimon, maybe Digivolve something in there raising, and it's going to bounce back to us, and we're going to go back up to 4 or so, maybe 3, based on what your opponent has on the field. Obviously if we just deleted stuff, we may not be benefiting from Hina, but we will be benefiting from Izzy. Start of our turn, we can swing with Justimon Critical Arm, who is going to, for a play cost of 2, this is their when attacking, let us evolve into another card with Justimon in its name. Obviously we've just bounced a Blitzarm back to our hand, so we're going to go into that one because it's when Digivolving lets us unsuspend. Okay, we can then choose to swing with this if we like to, bump up that DP again, we can unsuspend it using the once per turn effect, and then maybe once we've unsuspended we can go into something like Justimon Critical Arm, Justimon Excel Arm, who will then let us bounce the Blitzarm back to our hand to get the when Digivolving of Security Attack +1 and Piercing, plus it retains all that DP we've just given it through Blitzarm, and then it's going to swing with Security Attack +1 and Piercing, so it's going to keep going and this is going to keep looping. Now that it's attacking we can go back into a Blitzarm if we have the memory, unsuspend it. Obviously we can't do it when attacking again, so we may just want to go up into something else, maybe another Critical Arm or an Excel Arm, in order to get some more benefits, bounce it back to our hand, swing again and evolve, and it will keep looping based on how much memory and how many resources we have in our hand Justimon wise. So it's a really interesting play style, quite complex, but once you get it and understand it and have an appreciation of how the different pieces work together, it's really fun and really interesting. It's a very fun one to get out and play against other people because obviously it breaks a lot of the conventions of standard Digimon. So here are the different ratios of the deck that I've been using. Obviously you're going to want to be playing lots of your Justimons to make sure you're hitting them and making sure you can be looping the cycle as much as possible. 4 Justice Kicks is mandatory because if something clears out your Justimon, you're going to need another Justice Kick to be able to play it out nice and cheap. Some interesting things to note are the 4 Mimis. Obviously this card being cheap and super beneficial to our effects, it's important that we have lots of those. Only playing the 1 Izzy and Joe because again we're clearing so much of the board, it's unlikely that we're going to be benefiting from it, but we may, and if your opponent is playing something rush heavy that's going to be getting lots of Digimon on the field, it's important to have that. The 4 Fireballs are good as well, again because they can clear out small bodies or they can contribute to your draw. But other than that, this is a really fun, interesting deck. I recommend everyone give it a try. Obviously getting access to that Guilmon package for the draw can be quite expensive, and some of these option cards can be a little pricey too, but if you can get hold of it, I really do recommend it and give it a try. If you do give it a try and there are things you would change or things you'd recommend, I'd really love to hear them, so please leave it in the comments. I'll see you on the next one.